Americans love stories. This story ends with a climax in space, and it starts right here on Earth. Money, fame, immortality. People will feel like they know you.
My first question is, what was the biggest challenge that the writer staff proposed to you?
There weren't many challenges that weren't exciting to kind of take on. I think anytime you're telling a story that is real, a real story from history, there's a level of pressure probably to get it right that otherwise in a fictionalized story might not be present. But it doesn't really change too much of the approach, or at least my approach from how I go after the role. But for one, I don't have a military family. All these guys came from military backgrounds. You have people in the Marines, in the Army. Shepard was a Navy test pilot, Air Force. So I think just acclimating and acquainting myself to kind of the way military people hold themselves and conduct themselves. There's a certain chain of command that happens in the military, not just at work, but even at home. And Shepard came from, his father was a Marine and his grandfather was a Marine. So some of that took some time to just kind of, dig around and kind of find out what that day-to-day life was like. And then also there was just so much research we all could do. It was obviously a very well documented period of American history. So we had just tons and tons and tons of material that we could sift through. And we did that on our own on an individual basis. And then we did it as a cast together. We were all on an email chain pretty early once we were all officially cast. And we would all add little things we found, in addition to each of the astronauts' book that we were all respectively reading. Like, John Glenn has an autobiography, and then, Gus Grissom, I think, wrote a book, and then Deke Slayton, and then Alan Shepard actually didn't write his book. It was written about him after he had died. So it was actually a pretty unbiased, clear picture of the man and how he grew up, and details about him that, had he been alive to write it himself, which he'd never do because he valued his privacy so much, he might not have included in the book. So you had these cool little insights into these events that we were so familiar with that otherwise in some other tellings of the story weren't present. So, as far as what the biggest challenge was, I guess it was just wanting to make sure we all immersed ourselves in the time period as much as we could so that we could get not just the people right, but carry with us a little bit of the era that we were portraying, as much as we could. And that just came from really steeping in research as much as we could before we started. I mean, luckily Mark wrote an incredible script that put a framework for us to play in really, really well. And then kind of the finishing touches, I'd say, were all cosmetic. Like, how does this person hold themselves? How do they speak? Looking at videos of Shepard, trying to, emulate their posture and mannerisms to a point where it didn't feel hokey or kitschy. And then you kind of throw it all out the window and just show up on set and hope you get it right.
What do you think makes the difference between this series and compared to the Writer Staff movie released in the 80s?
Well, I'd say for one, time, real estate. Like, we've got, 8 episodes that are about an hour each to tell the same story. So that's just one asset that doing a TV series has sometimes over a film, is simply time. You can slow the story down. You can explore avenues that might have not been possible when you're restricted to 2.5 hours or 3 hours. So I think, the time helps us, and then also the ability to get deeper into these personal relationships that these men had at home. We get to learn more about their wives, Gloria Cooper's wife, Trudy, being a pilot herself, Shepard's wife, Louise, compartmentalizing, who he is when he's out with the guys versus who he is as a family man at home. Annie Glenn, overcame a stutter. So we get into these, personal stories a lot more than probably the movie had time for. And I think, one of the things that I really enjoyed and didn't know about the story until I started working on it was just how famous these guys were, and relatively quick, like overnight fame, like on Beatles level, and how important maintaining that image of these supermen, these infallible, perfect guys these were, and what pressure that put on them in their personal lives. Because, unlike a musician or an actor or director at the time, test pilots were not famous people. And if they were famous people, it's because they did something like break the sound barrier, or they were an ace pilot in the war. These guys got famous overnight before they had done anything. And I think our show leans into that reality maybe a little bit more than the movie had time to do, where it shows how much that could rip you apart at home, having to live up to this idolized version of yourself that when really all you want to do is drink whiskey and go fast.
As an actor, do you feel identified with the right stuff characters on dealing with media and fame?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a parallel there a little bit. I mean, I'm not familiar with that level of fame, but, in a myopic sense, sure. Like, I have a job, everybody on the show has a job that's going to be up for discussion, analyzed and judged by people in mass, which is the same or similar pressure that these guys were under to perform. And any time that you are in a profession that's going to have a facet to it that involves a public life or a public persona, trying to calibrate the difference between who you are at home versus who you are publicly is always, a weird, very idiosyncratic thing for anyone to navigate. So yeah, there's definitely parallels between I think us as actors on the show and these people as celebrities in this dispute.
In some way, the series saw the government taking advantage of astronauts for its benefits. Do you think that the entertainment world works in the same way with all those biggest companies with dealing with actors or other kind of artists?
I don't think it's, maybe back around the time that this story takes place, that might be more how the entertainment world took place too. I don't think, especially now, there's many people who could live up to such a spotless, curated image by either a government or a studio system. I think we know now people are fallible. I think now more than ever, in a lot of cases, people actually are, appreciate seeing somebody's faults and somebody being honest about their faults, recovering from their faults. Whereas, the challenge of NASA and the government in the 1960s to basically paint a perfect image of these people to maintain public interest and public support in the space program might have been true for the Hollywood system, back then, but I don't think that that's true as much now.
Do you think that the proliferation of digital platforms like Disney Plus has offered you more job opportunities as an actor?
Yeah, I do. I think, we're living in kind of a second golden age of television in a lot of ways. There's a lot more shows and a lot more access to shows. I don't know how many shows there are, but it feels like a lot. And so, yeah, of course, I think that opens doors for people who otherwise might not have had opportunities, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, because there's just, an abundance of content being made. And I think it also puts the power back into creators. I know a lot of people who recently, for the first time, are starting to develop their own projects because, there's more places to find a home for them.
How does an actor feel about having the responsibility of paying homage to one of the first American astronauts?
I mean, yeah, there's always a little bit of pressure when you're playing somebody real from history. I was in a movie, American Sniper, where I played Ryan Jobe, who was a Navy SEAL on the team with Chris Kyle, and that was kind of my first real taste of that. And it's nerve-wracking, but I mean, at the end of the day, the approach to the work is really similar. I take my work really seriously, and that doesn't really change whether it's fiction or nonfiction. the approach is still pretty much the same. There's sometimes, instead of a blank canvas, there's some, indicators on how this person operates or their mentality that are almost serve as guidelines. Whereas if it's fictionalized, it's more up to you and up to the script. But yeah, I mean, there's a pressure, but at the end of the day, you've got to put that out of your mind. I mean, there's a pressure with this one because even, Scott Glenn played Alan Shepard in the movie and did a terrific job. But in the same respect, you just kind of can't think about that too much and try to trust yourself and go in focused on doing it right.
How were the trainings for the series?
Oh man, I wish we got to do a lot more, honestly, but it's a big cast and these things move really fast. So we didn't get to do all the things that I think were on the cast, like astronaut bucket list, like the vomit comet or zero gravity or that stuff. But, some of the locations we got to go visit were amazing and so helpful. We got to go to the Kennedy Space Center in Cocoa Beach, which is where all these events took place. And Colin and Patrick and I got to go to the 50th anniversary gala of landing on the moon. Michael Collins was there. Mark Kelly was there. Astronauts were there with us that we could talk to, which was mind blowing. Some of the training you actually saw on camera, especially in episode 3, there's something called the Mastiff, which is a big machine that simulates an aircraft spinning out of control. And Colin and I both had to do that. And we didn't get any practice in that. The practice that we got was on camera in real time.
And my last question, what do you think the viewers are going to enjoy more of the Right Stuff series?
I hope that obviously that it's, the historical aspect of it is important and it's fascinating. And, SpaceX had its launch, Falcon launch with astronauts, with a manned launch to space this March, I think it was. And this story is kind of how all that started in America. It's a story that even though it has had a movie adaptation and a book written about it, that's still, I think, relatively unknown to a lot of people my age and obviously a lot of people younger. Most of us know the moon landing in Apollo 11, Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, Michael Collins, those guys. So to find out how that started from a historical standpoint, I think is exciting. And then also just seeing what a nation can accomplish, when all working together towards the same goal. I think that translates across borders and across generations. And there's a universal truth that, no matter how impossible things seem, social injustice or climate change or global pandemic, if we all work together and unify, we can accomplish some pretty incredible things.
I know what you want, John. But it's almost like you're afraid of the competition.
Protect your image. We'll have everything to lose.